So, most of you have played the original Mass Effect games or Andromeda, but you may not know that in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Bioware began developing Mass Effect Corsair. Mass Effect Corsair was a cancelled game meant for the Nintendo DS that focused on new characters, new planets that weren't actually, explorable in the original trilogy games. However, the main difference with Mass Effect Corsair was the difference in gameplay between the original Mass Effect trilogy and what Corsair was envisioned to be by Bioware. If Mass Effect Corsair had gotten the green light in terms of development, it could have been the perfect chance to improve on one of the most disliked squad mates in the series, Jacob Taylor, but more on him later. The cancelled game would have focused on the Corsairs within the Alliance army. Corsairs were essentially black operative soldiers who the Alliance sent in to do their dirty work for them, as well as secret operations such as assassinations, cover-ups and covert missions. Corsairs are essentially, the closest I can give them, they're very similar to the Spectres, sort of like Shepard, which would have made interesting protagonists and groups of characters, because we haven't really had a character like Shepard really as of yet, because obviously the Pathfinders in Andromeda were completely different. A link to the original trilogy games would have been through Jacob Taylor, who I mentioned earlier, who is a party member that you meet in Mass Effect 2, and then obviously later then you meet him again in Mass Effect 3. Before he left the Alliance to join Cerberus, he was actually originally a Corsair, and the story in this game would have featured him in some way, shape or form. So seeing him start in this game as a Corsair, being a prequel to Mass Effect 2, we would have showed his beginning, his struggles with the Alliance, and his later switch to Cerberus, which would have been really interesting and would have given the character even more depth. But the only problem for me here was the fact that this game would have been developed for Nintendo DS, and as you well know, the Nintendo DS on the specification side of things isn't the most powerful bit of hardware, although it's, at the time it was revolutionary and took over the handheld market. But after doing some research, I've found some interesting development notes from Bioware themselves. According to former Bioware executive Mark Darrah, players would have taken control of an independent Han Solo type character, as mentioned before, being a Corsair, piloting a vessel around the lawless frontiers of the Milky Way galaxy, doing missions, side quests and exploring along the veins of Privateer and Star Control. So basically we would have played as a Corsair doing, dirty work for the Alliance and odd jobs. The DS game would have featured ship combat as well as forays into Batarian space, which again wasn't really explored too much in the original trilogy. Obviously in the Mass Effect 2 DLC it was a bit, but in 3 we didn't really get too much of it. Bioware was able to put together the beginnings of a flight control system as well as space combat. However, the project was then scrapped altogether and cancelled. In terms of development, it was cancelled for several reasons, though primarily due to money. Due to its size of the game, it would have required the most expensive type of DS cartridge on the market at the time, essentially costing £10.50 or around $12 to make, and it would have retailed for about $30. Though with EA's projections that it would only sell about 50,000 copies at best, it was determined that the profits wouldn't be enough to cover the costs. Additionally, Bioware couldn't quite figure out how to fit the game's space travel and sort of new lore additions into the existing lore and universe going into Mass Effect 2 and 3. However, the team working on Mass Effect Corsair eventually went away to work on other spin-offs that I'll cover in future videos, such as Mass Effect Galaxy and Mass Effect Infiltrator, which again will both have their own separate videos and retrospectives. Anyway guys, what do you think of the cancelled Mass Effect game essentially being Corsair? Would you have liked to have played it, even though it was a Nintendo DS game? Personally, I had a DS, but at the time there was no way I would have touched this game because I probably would have been about 8 or 9 when the DS was around, so there's no way I would have touched this game because I didn't even know what Mass Effect was back then. That shows my age a bit there. But anyway guys, for more cancelled Mass Effect projects and as well as games that have gone under the radar in the Mass Effect series, stay subscribed to the channel. I'm going to be covering the anime, the other games, the iOS games, things like that, so stay focused for them in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.